From the Government Administration Building in Phillipsburg, the Department of Communication, in collaboration with the Probation Department and the Prosecutor's Office, welcomes you to this Domestic Violence and Mediation panel discussion. Here are your hosts and moderators, Ms. Ramona Riley and Mr. Christian Granum.
Violence against women is a men's issue. Violence against women is an issue that concerns us all. Violence against women is a symptom of gender inequalities. Violence against women runs counter to the basic freedoms, the basic rights that every person should have.
While it is often men who commit acts of domestic violence, sexual assaults, and stalking, males can also be victims of these crimes. We seek to engage men as part of the solution, not just in terms of educating them about their personal actions in intimate relationships, but also in their roles as fathers, friends, and community leaders. SJIS and the Prosecutor's Office, in collaboration with DCOM, presents a group of men who have agreed to lend their voices and platforms to stand with women in the fight against domestic violence.
Honorable Minister of Justice Anna Richardson, panelists, invited guests, on behalf of the DVM project team, Ms. Cynthia Philemon, Ms. Sandra Whitfield, and Ms. Sana Bartels, I take this opportunity to welcome you to this panel discussion, Where Do You Stand? We know that it's going to be an interesting discussion, and we look forward to your participation as well. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to the co-moderator to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Ramona. I would first start with Mr. Lawrence. Alson Lawrence is a married father of 4 daughters, a radio host, entrepreneur, and activist from St. Martin. Besides all of the organizations Alson has worked for or volunteered during his free time, he's well known as being a guest speaker on the relationship show Now You Know, Venus and Mars, where he openly expressed his modern takes and perspectives on being a man in a relationship in this society. He's a media designer by trade and runs his own business since 2010 called Saint Marketing. To his immediate left, we have Mark Hilton, Colin Mark Hilton, an insurance professional at Caribbean Alliance Insurance, father of a prince, a foodie, travelholic, sportsaholic, and a bearded cook. And to his left, we have Jamal Cummins Sr. Jamal Cummins Sr. was born in Queens, New York, but shortly after his birth, he relocated with his mother back to her home on the island of St. Martin. Jamal attended the Methodist Agoghic Center and the St. Martin Academy prior to moving to Atlanta, Georgia in 1998 with his family. After graduating from Redan High School, Stone Mountain, Georgia in June 1999, he enlisted in the U.S. Army later that year. Jamal served in the U.S. Army for over 8 years, traveling to countries such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Kuwait, Germany, and Iraq. After leaving the Army, he worked for the Department of the Army as a human resource specialist for 12 years. Jamal is also an international speaker, entrepreneur, and author. He earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Biblical Studies from the Minnesota Graduate School of Theology and a Bachelor's of Business Administration with a concentration in entrepreneurship from Strayer University in 2013. He is currently pursuing a master's degree in adult education. He is married to the former Chanel Hightower, and they have 4 children, Mark, Sean, Jemiah, and Jamal Jr. And last and not least, we have Mr. Lenworth Wilson. This Caribbean man was born and raised on the beautiful island of Jamaica. Lenworth and his wife, Shermel, are owners of Wilson Total Wellness Company, where they provide educational support to students, parents, and institutions, as well as consultancy for social development and green technology solutions. He is the founder of Gifted Foundation, an organization known throughout the region for its contributions to youth and community development. Over the years, he has been established as a dynamic motivational speaker, mentor, educator, and youth advocate. He currently provides consultancy for UNICEF, the Netherlands, as an adolescent development and youth participation specialist. This educator and multi-entrepreneur works to continue to a sharp reflection of his faith, purpose-oriented mindset, and visionary leadership. That was definitely a mouthful, Mr. Wilson.
Men are not always included in discussions on prevention and are often only discussed as abusers. However, it is important to include men in conversations and strategies aimed at preventing domestic violence. This shifts the focus from solely looking at men as abusers to viewing them as key actors in ending the culture of violence towards women. Edmund Burke says, all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Today, we want to thank you, good men, for honoring our invitation and lending your voices to this cause. Our goal is an abuse-free society.
Thank you. So we'll now open up the questions to the panelists, and I'd like to send my first question to Jamal. Seeing, after going through your bio and seeing that you were stationed in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Kuwait, and Iraq, where for novices, I guess, domestic violence might be very prevalent in these countries. So my first question to you is, what is a man's role in bringing awareness to domestic violence?
Well, I believe a man's role as it pertains to domestic violence is just doing what we're doing here today, amongst other things. But I think it's important for all men to really stand up for the women in this world that are going through domestic violence. Because, like you mentioned, living in Saudi Arabia, one of the things there is women, now they're starting to give them a little bit more rights. But for example, although we were in their country, whenever a woman would leave, one of the service women would leave the base, they would always, as soon as they leave the base, or before they leave the base, they would have to wear the robe of what a Saudi Arabian woman would wear. So, I'm sorry? Hijab, yes. And so there was no negotiations with that. So that was important that, that they do that. But going back again, it's important for us to stand up worldwide and doing things like this to bring awareness, not just in these social media, the world now through social media, things go viral so quick. And so it's important that we bring awareness to our own lives and how we treat our wives, just in the way we interact with our wives. And as well, I have a daughter. I do my best to treat her like I want her future husband to treat her, so that when he knows that my dad treated me with respect, and you need to do that as well.
Thank you very much, Jamal. I would like to extend that same question to you, Lenward.
Thanks, Christian. The role of men, I think it is to somewhat be gatekeepers, because I think a lot of it skates by because men don't hold each other accountable. And so what we now have as a culture of locker room talk or barbershop talk, but it's on the court, and some things that are said in jest or just said casually, people admitting to having a violent relationship with their partner, and then it is not taken as a serious thing to be addressed. So I think the role of men is to change that culture and create one where it is not tolerated, where there's zero tolerance for violence against anyone, but especially against those who are vulnerable, those who men are charged to protect, especially women and children.
I like something that you mentioned, accountability. I think that's a very important word, and it's a word that we're hearing very frequent in our society right now, about our ministers being accountable, civil servants being accountable, people in the sphere of our society being accountable for their actions. So I'd like to direct this question to you, Mark. How does a man keep... So Lenward just mentioned that there's this locker room talk. So you might have a friend that engaged in domestic violence with his partner. How do you keep your friend, somebody that's been very close to you, we're friends. So let's say, for example, me, you hear me engaging in some activities that you find not not exemplary for me to be doing? How do you keep me accountable?
Thank you, Christian. It is just that we have to hold each other accountable for what we say and what we do. If you believe in what you say, goes out into the universe and then comes back. So we as men, when we're speaking amongst each other, should speak to or about respect to women, and for ourselves as well. So in you saying, are we listening to you degrading or speaking of domestic violence against your partner, we should all men come together and hold your hand and say, listen, this is not right. This is not what you should be about for yourself and for your spouse, and not what you want to portray on, since we use you as a example, your daughter, for instance. I'm sure you wouldn't want anybody to treat your daughter how you then, if you were being violent against your wife, to be treated that way.
Thank you, Mark. And then for Alston, you mentioned in your bio that you have a take on the new man in a modern relationship. So a new man in a modern relationship means what to you, and how does that relate into bringing awareness to domestic violence in this society right now?
Okay, thank you again for having me in this esteemed panel of peers. I think when it comes to a man and how a man is set in a role, which is a word we use here already, and now we get into relationships, like we never focus enough, and this is something new happening in the world now, focus on that man's relationship with himself. You know, that's where it all starts. You know, not all of our daughters are going to be married. Not every man is in a situation where he talks with other men at the basketball court. Some men, I think the worst ones won't talk about it, you know, and they won't go nowhere around other men. So as a society, and it was said here already about culture, as a society, not just men, as a society, we need to build a new culture that does not accept violence in terms of abuse, you know. And also, I think we need to have more discussion about it, because sometimes people are in very long relationships with people and it gets violent or got violent. And it's never like, you know, it happens once and then people break up and they run away. But we never really check why it happens as well. No excuses whatsoever for hitting anybody. But before a man gets that far, he probably had a argument that went too far already. There's probably some stress he's dealing with. There's a lot of things involved with a man, especially in society right now. Jamal was talking about how women in that culture, but in this culture, this macho Western Caribbean culture, you know, men are now being able to even talk about this. You know what I mean? Even to talk about anything related to a man and how he feel. You understand? So that's part of it. As men start to know themselves better and have better relationships with themselves, they'll be able to understand to have a better relationship with my sister or anybody's sister or anybody's daughter. How do we treat women, period? You know, not just who we love, but who we don't know in St. Martin. And that's why I think, you know, not me, the world and how the world starts to look at men differently is very important, and we need to pay attention to that rather than only look traditionally, because traditionally we would never hear about most abuse, ever.
So what I get from your take on it is that men need to find a way to become more emotionally intelligent. So whether it's reading or from their peers. So my question to the panel is, do you believe that domestic violence, so a man perpetuating violence towards his partner, do you believe that is a symptom of something else? What was that brought in from, like you say, men not being able to express themselves ideally in certain settings, and they come home or wherever they might be, and then that now is I don't know how to deal with my feelings, and now this is an expression of me dealing with my feelings. So I'd like to just open up that question to the panel.
I think it speaks to toxic masculinity, from the standpoint that in the culture that we're in, it is shunned upon for a man to cry or to be emotional. You have to be this macho man, so to speak. You walk around with your head held high, and the muscles then brought out. So for men to then go and speak about how they're feeling, you have a bad day, like, I am man, I just gotta suck it up. Then you're going still in the back of your mind, you're still upset about something. You go home and you take out that obsession, that aggression and frustration on whomever is in the house, be it your spouse, your kids, even people around you. So it is a cultural thing. It's the way that we think. Austin said you need to change your mindset, which is correct from the standpoint that we grew up thinking that a man is a man. You got that saying, man's man. What really is a man's man? Man's man, by our definition, is to be this big, strong person that has no emotion. So for us to go forward, we need to look at ourselves and say that you can't be macho anymore. You can be macho, but you also have to be sensitive and understanding.
I like to learn about my family history on both sides. And many times when you talk to family members about, grandfather, great-grandfather, whatever, sometimes they will interject. Yeah, he used to beat the kids, used to beat the wife, and not just in my family per se, but other families. You talk to people who know about their family, and they will say that sometimes, casually, and you realize it passes down from generation to generation. It's not something that just happened over time because one generation didn't deal with it. It carries over to the next generation and the next generation. And so kids see this and they continue that because you could, what's the old adage? You can tell your child what to do, but your child see what you do. There's not necessarily, what you say is what you do. And your kids see what you do, as fathers. They see how I interact with my wife. If we're constantly yelling, most likely than not, they're going to be yelling amongst each other. And then later on in life, they will perpetuate that same behavior. So important for me, speaking for myself, I have to make sure that my wife and I, when we interact, I got to make sure, okay, what is she saying? Because typically when domestic violence happens, like somebody said, one of the panelists said earlier, it didn't just happen. It's something, there's some kind of anger there. And typically when the domestic violence is perpetuated against the victim, in this case, the woman, it was some kind of, I'm mad about something and I don't know how to deal with my feelings. So this is the way that I was taught to deal with my feelings. And we have to, I think it's important for us as men to learn to deal with our feelings internally, have that emotional intelligence there's so much trainings out there now on emotional intelligence and communication and things like that. But we have to know as men, you're not using your masculinity by doing things like this or even going to training or asking for counseling. That we have to be able to go to counseling and talk to, and it may not be a professional counselor, maybe somebody, one of your brothers, hey, Austin, I'm struggling with this. And have that, and because a lot of times men, when we speak to someone, we want that secrecy. Hey man, I don't want to know that you're going and tell such and such, somebody else. And so we have to have that secrecy amongst us, but also the accountability part to keep us, accountable.
For me, in terms of it being a symptom of something else, I remember a statement being made by motivational speaker Willie Jolly, and he said, "Hurt people hurt people." And so it goes from the sentiments expressed so far in terms of men not being able to process their emotions. But when we see abusers, just like if in school you see bully, you don't think that this bully is being bullied. You don't think that this bully has suffered trauma. They're just inflicting trauma. And so while we are addressing the effect of the abuse now being inflicted, to stop it, it's not just a matter of removing the partner, of breaking up, or even just arresting the perpetrator. But if there's no intervention in terms of rehabilitation and getting to the root of the issue, how long you gonna serve for domestic violence? You're gonna come out and you're gonna do it again. And then how often you would get away with it before you actually get to the line of justice. And so I really think that it starts from that a lot of times we see things coming out in adulthood that start from childhood. And I work in the area of child rights, so I'll tie it back to that. And Article 29 of the Child Rights Convention speaks about not just the right to access education, but the type of education and how children are supposed to be educated. And part of it says that they must be taught to respect other people, other people's property, other people's background, other people's, everything about what makes us individuals, and also the environment and also their parents' principles. But a lot of times our education is not based on character development. It's not focused on teaching respect. It's just you learn math, English, science in school, but who you are as a person, the character development is missing. So people, you come up, you're angry. This is the way you learn to deal with things emotionally or not deal with them at all. That's just it. There's no support there from the upbringing. So when we see it in adulthood, we just see the result, but we don't focus on what caused it.
I would further say all violence comes from something. All violence is a result of some extra stress in some area, you know. And when it comes to men, that side, those things that pressure men have not really been talked about, because for men, we didn't want to talk about it, basically. So now in the modern world, and that's what Ledward is also saying, we need to socialize our children and us. We need to re-socialize what a man is and what a man does. And so it takes all of that stress off of the man. They're not saying that every man that commits that type of abuse against his children or his wife, you know, not saying all of them, you know, they're serious, they're different people in the world, you know, they have pains in different ways. But if we can socialize everybody, you know, he said some very important values that I know some countries, the same way in some countries, you know, you can make sure that all women socialize in a particular way. You can do the same for men. There are a lot of places where men are, you know, paternity being extended here. That's a big thing for men. And like nobody ever thought about it, period, because why? But then we complain that the men don't have a connection with their children, you know. So we as a society, and that's a great example here in St. Martin that happened, we as a people, you know, and in the Caribbean even, because this culture, this macho culture is Caribbean culture. And to make it worse, we charming. So, you know, it makes it worse because you don't look at the person and see it as a monster. And when we have male friends, sometimes we don't know that's a monster as well. And so we have to kind of open up the discussion, because the things that may trigger him usually are, you know, I don't want to make an example of it, but the things that may trigger, if they're normally talked about, they may not be such a pressure when it's said, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, the guys understand. We understand that, yeah. So I want to say, a lot of you mentioned that abuse comes from something triggers that. As men, as fathers, what are you going to do differently? Because a lot of it starts at home. What are you going to do differently? How can you help other men? Because one of the things I believe that as parents, what we do unconsciously, we yell at our children, we call them names, we don't give them the opportunity to respond, to say what they are feeling. You know, we shut them down. That's what we do. And do you think that's part of the whole package of domestic violence that's being perpetrated? And how do you suggest? I know, Lenbert, you're eager to jump in.
No, because again, children and youth and education, I think on this panel, I'm probably the least experienced parent, but from my background in education, I feel like I've fathered many. So I think that, to your question, what we do in terms of teaching children is firstly understanding that it's a 24/7 role. it's not something that you could time out from. If Jamal is driving down the street, his son is in the back seat. He thinks his son is on his tablet or his phone or whatever, but he's watching him. He's watching his interaction. He watches when he rolls down the window to shout out at somebody out the window. He listens to the phone call and how you deal with the phone call. And when you lie to the person and say you're around the corner and you know we're close. I'm just using Jamal as an example. And they're constantly learning whether we're actively teaching or not. And so when we don't actively teach, when we're not intentional about the things that we pass on, the values, when we don't actively make sure that they know there's no excuse for violence. Don't tell me your sister said this and so that gave you a right. There is no excuse for violence. Make sure that it's drilled in. Actively combat that concept, that idea. And another idea that I think that you have to actively combat is one that I think socially created this idea that cowardice is macho, and it's not presented in that way. But when we teach them, you don't snitch, regardless of what. You're not snitching not because of some code that you or loyalty. It's more so fear-based. I don't snitch because I don't want to deal with the repercussions. So I hear my neighbor beating the skin off of his wife, and I mind my business because I don't want to be labeled as a snitch. I'm not the one who got the police coming in to come question him. And again, our children are watching and observing when daddy is quiet, when daddy doesn't intervene, when daddy just says nothing, and it's not even a point of this, mind your business, go do your homework. Mm-hmm. And they're watching, they're learning. So I think that's our role, to actively combat the messaging, actively teach our children the right culture.
Thinking about, was that? Yeah, really thought-provoking. Right there, even just thinking about, because what you said about your kids in the back seat, because my kids, when they ride with me to go pick up mom or just go to the grocery store, you are absolutely right. The kids are right there and they're watching. And my son, on many occasions, have mentioned, Dad, you did this, you said this. And I forgot that I said it. Out of normal conversation, you may have said something. But to your point, they're always listening or watching. They may be on their phones, but they're still listening. And so that gets my attention span to make sure I'm strategic and don't yell at the car in front of me when they're there. I'm just kidding. But no, it's true. No. But seriously, making sure that I'm strategic in how I do things especially around the kids, because the kids do what you do. They don't do what you say, but they do what you do. And as just being at home and around your kids, I've learned the importance of just to your point, just let them speak, because when my mother is from this culture, and Caribbean mothers typically you don't get the word in. Okay, let's just be honest. It's just not against my mom. It's pretty much every mom. But I've learned. But I've learned to allow them to speak, and sometimes it's hard because their tone of voice may be higher than what my mother would allow. But I've learned to let them speak, get it out. I may still tell them no to their question or their concern, but I use it as a teaching moment. And so I think that's important. That one thing I've learned to do with my kids, let them speak. My daughter, she's very vocal. She would ask why. And having one girl, I get it. I've learned to just understand, answer her questions, and go from there. But I've learned that if I don't answer her questions and I don't answer his question, somebody else may, and there may be anger built up from that. So.
Anyone else want to add?
I would advise, the main thing men in any sort of family should do, any relationship, period, should do, is really spend time. Time is very important. I know years ago I was so busy. People think I'm busy now. I was busier before, and that was, 20 hours a day doing what you think you're doing, which is right for your family. I could tell you, you're always going to regret not connecting with your children. Always. Always, you're going to regret it. So, men, a simple thing to do is really put in in your regular schedule to really spend some time with your children. And if you have a partner, your wife, make sure you do that. Overdate your wife. Overdate her. Get sick of each other. Spending time alone, out of regular day-to-day things. Because when you know somebody, you start to care for them. And as much as we assume because you had a child, you love the child, it really isn't that way naturally. You still have to have time and understanding of who your child is, because every one of your children are going to be different. Everyone is different, have different needs from you. And there are some needs that maybe you can't give as well. So you have to become wise about your family, because you got a job, you go to your job, right? You have to go to your job. Even if you don't do nothing there, you have to go to your job. You have to put time in your job. So when you're a father or a husband or even a partner, you have to put time into the things that are important. And one thing with family, even if it's beach, even if it's dominoes, I have 4 girls, which means nothing they want to do, I wanted to do. Nothing, absolutely. I've woken up with nails painted. All of it. But guess what? It softened me up a lot because I have girls, and I realize you can't talk to this one this way or that one that way. You have to know your family, and that is something that even older friends of mine have always told me. Like, no matter what opportunity you get, try to find a way to have time, and that's an advice to avoid abuse and these sort of different things. Another one is kids. Same thing. Your kids. Watch what they're looking at, we used to say this, I remember when I was in high school, parents used to say, watch the gangster movies and the CDs they listening to, the gangster rap. I don't know if it did us as bad as what, TikTok does to kids now, because they don't even really digest it anymore. They just flick. And as parents, there are things out there that you should. We always jump to sex. We don't want to see sex. They're worse than that. They're what we're talking about. They're cultural, toxic masculinity, showing people being abused. Those sort of things. And those are the things we need to get out of our own digestion and watch that the kids are digesting it. There are certain rappers now worse than all of the gangster rappers from the 90s. And for real, like problems. And when kids glorify that, you have a whole other problem, because you no way look as interesting a man than NBA young boy or some of these idiots that out there. So this is what men also have to deal with. Okay, look at that man there with all of those cars, and all of that going on. And my father, who's a plumber, want to talk to me loud. Is what our kids see is we can control. And I'm not for censorship super, but for my children, I'm going to censor them. My children never been to a carnival village ever. Okay, they come on family day with me. You understand? So no matter what you're doing, you have to really pay attention to your tribe and what they into. And that's what I would say about that.
So I heard from the panel a lot about the future, instilling the future generations on what to do and what not to do, especially when it comes to relationships with their partners, whether it's the general sense of a man and woman, or male and male, female and female relationships, how to engage with those. So I think everybody here is doing an excellent job in trying to make sure that the next generations does not commit the same sins that their fathers did. But how are we going to deal with domestic violence now, right? How are we going to, so I don't have the statistics with me right now, but we do have a safe haven for battered women, but there are men that go to seek refuge there as well. What can we do in the society right now to, and some of it was mentioned already, but I would like to really bring that home. What can we do to ensure that, because y'all are fathers trying to make sure that your kids don't commit these same sins, right? But there are children right now seeing their fathers do that or their mothers do that, and how do we address that at the home at this current moment? And I'd like to well, no, yeah. Let me start with Mark.
I guess we are start with the education of educating the current group. Instead of the future group looking to the future, the current group, we need to try and educate them. And if they're not able to get that stimulation, that good stimulation from home, now we have to look into a sort of mentorship for those that's already in it. So we need more men, more positive or good men, as Miss Riley called them.
But how do you do that, right? Because you see, part of the panel discussion, and I think you mentioned it, is you might not know that your friend is an abuser, right?
We gotta talk about it.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to bring it up.
Yeah.
Bring up the.
But it's an uncomfortable conversation,
It
right?
is. It is.
And sometimes, because I've had this experience happen to me in the past where I found out a friend of mine, not a close friend, but a friend of mine was abusive. And I did the cowardice thing, and I did not, because I didn't know how to do it. And for me, and to this day, I regret it, because it's just like, okay, Christian, why you couldn't stand up? Like, what fear kept you from standing up? So I want to know, so you're saying education, but how are you going to educate? Because like you said earlier, men don't go to counseling. Like that was 5 years ago, that was taboo. So how do we encourage that to happen?
So I think you use the right key terms. Well, first of all, identifying that fear was a part of the motivation behind the response or the lack of a response, but also in terms of education and the how. I think we can use the same tools that are being used. Alston mentioned how, in terms of what the young people are consuming, and we have to understand that media, when music is just, it's accepted to the point where referring to a woman as a female dog is just normal. Even in relationships, you hear people talk about my bee, and it's just normalized. Media did that. And so I think that we can use media tools, whether it's social media, billboards, public campaigns that promote the standards that we want to see in our society. I believe that we can, there's a thing called communication for behavioral impact, that you use strategic communication tools in transmitting messages. I remember working with Alston about 7 years back when we did the I Am King campaign, where we had young men and those so some prominent members of society, and we did some campaign posters with just men making statements about what true manhood would be, would look like, or should look like. And I think in the same way, if we can get that messaging, that's what is being used. The messaging that's constantly going on, whether through music, through entertainment, or just through public service announcements, you see it on the billboards. It is carrying a statement, and it dictates what is cool, what is accepted, what is culturally normal. And so if we are intentional about doing that as government and private sector, in pushing that message to end domestic violence, to end spousal abuse, to be conscious of what we are not just showing the next generation, but what we are putting on them. Because when the spouse is being abused, the child is also being abused. Just like how when you witness an act of kindness, the person receiving the act of kindness, the person doing the act of kindness, and the person witnessing the act of kindness all experience this euphoria. In the same way with the abuse, the person carrying out the abuse, all that anger and rage that they're expressing, the person on the receiving end, all that trauma that they're enduring, and the person witnessing it. So we have to target all all those, well, let's call them stakeholders then, in communicating what we want to see as a community.
I mean, I think they both kind of talked about the education system. I think that's very important to because I think it was W.E. Du Bois said it's easier to train children versus men, because typically men, as you get older, you're set in your ways. Not that you can't change your mindset, but we're typically, or adults for that matter, are typically set in their ways. So it's important to teach the children for the next generation, from the school age, just like, now the kids are getting sex education in the schools. Well, they should be getting emotional intelligence. They should be getting, anger management. It's interesting that we get anger management classes after. Think about it. We get it after, when I'm 45. I already don't have 45 years of, anger built up. No, we need to get it from a young age so we can teach our youth how to deal with, because I think sometimes, conflict resolution, because I think sometimes our kids are kids, but they still have feelings. They still have to they're still dealing with life. And I have my oldest son, he's 24 now, and he was 16 at the time. And I didn't fully understand some of the stuff that he was dealing with. And so now I believe I'm a little bit better equipped when my other two kids come up. Well, three. I got three more to go to teenage. Y'all pray for me. But in, going through those years, but in learning that, really understanding what they're going through and really thinking about, like to your point about TikTok and all this other stuff, I believe too, we could, like you said, with the social media, put TikTok videos out there about domestic violence and stuff like that. Because they're getting kids, that's what they do now. Millions of views and just going through videos and stuff like that. Let's do that, because that's the way we're going to get their attention, because that's where everybody's on their phone right now, for the most part. And so if we can get in there, because that's where the money's being spent, what I'm saying, in social media, TikTok, YouTube, and stuff like that. And
you reach the entire community at the same time. So while you're teaching the future generation, that you're addressing the current issue. If I go to see a movie and I see Alston and Mark on the screen in an ad, that's directly condemning domestic violence. If I go and I see, I'm scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, I see Versatile pop up in an ad, using these figures that we know that are respected in our community, then we can send the right message.
Like right now, and kudos to the organizations here. I think St. Martin has been doing quite some stuff, in terms of not just punishing, but also like starting rehabilitation. I know there are some programs like that been on the radio. So we are way better. I think overall we need better role models, and not in the way like you write role model. I think we also need to, and I don't mean this in no weird way, I just mean we need to stop, our efforts possibly need to not say stop domestic violence, because it's too, okay, there's some preachy things we're going to talk there. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, right? Those words are very high level planning, but to the person on the ground, they see that and like it didn't see nothing. Like it didn't see anything at all. When they see imagery, it makes something different. And sometimes the abuse imagery shows abuse. So, so we have to really use role models in the right way. We have a lot of local people who are already these social media people. Things like that, you have to find a clever way to do it, because I'm telling you, like they're going to listen to some rap right now and go on a music video and have this whole adventure happening there. And then we now as men, we need to play a role in what the role model is. I don't know, sometimes we need a counter message. Saying, don't do that might be harder for somebody to digest than saying, we're doing this. And like, so strategies like that, I think we need. I think we're a very small place, but we have some of those problems because of how multicultural we are. You're dealing with so much backgrounds of people, and that makes it difficult. So programs that I know SGIS has and some other ones have, those are great programs. I don't know how the punishment is, but knowing that punishment is there, I think it does something, you know. And then again, there are those one-off situations that possibly didn't need to go that far, but now they've gone this far and they turn a man into a criminal. For the rest of his life now he feels like shame, you know? So it's a lot of work to do. That's what needs to happen. We need to have better role models. Another part that I have here is rehabilitation and punishment. But again, prevention is better than cure, always. All abuse, and we didn't mention this piece, but all abuse, everybody involved in it, like Glenwood was saying, it leaves back mental abuse. Yeah. All of us. So the person that does it, they're left with it. So it needs to be a constantly we need to take care of our mental health in this country and just overall. It's easy to look at, you know, the crime movie than the let me help you clear your stress movie, you know, so we have a hard job to do. As fathers, as husbands, as boyfriends, whatever it is we have to always think about mental health as well, of who we are in relation with. Are they okay? You know, are your kids okay? You can't just think your kid's okay. You have to sometimes ask them, are they okay? And these are the things we need to promote. No, I think, like, to answer your question directly.
Before Ramona gets to her question, the hormone in charge of stress, cortisol, when you engage in this mental abuse, right, it takes 7 hours for your body to get rid of those, for your cortisol levels to go back to normal, right? So it's in fact true what you're saying, like the mental abuse leads to other things because I do something that makes me happy, that hormone just lasts for like 15, 20 minutes. The stress hormone that deals with these things lasts 7 hours in your body. So that's 7 hours you're dealing with what just happened that just took like 5 seconds, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So what I heard from you in this round is that we must reach the young people where they're at. We've got to do that because one of the things, having panel discussions and having workshops and those kind of settings, we are not reaching them. I remember recently there was a workshop here at the government building on teen dating violence, and there was I think there was one teen, if I'm not mistaken, and very few parents. And these are the things I'm saying, who are we targeting? Who is our audience? Who are the persons that we want to reach? And if we want to reach our youngsters, Alston, I know you have your marketing team, and that's a brilliant idea. And I'm sure we can count on your support when it comes to this. I know he's not going to say no. And also I must also mention, there's also rehabilitation. There's a program that's ongoing right now. I know the SJIS, the probation department is doing. They have the safe homes training, where, you know, you don't need to wait until you get to court and a judge orders you to go to this training. If you know someone that has that issue, has an anger problem, and they want help, you can say, you know what, I know a program, a 3-month program. Let's go to, probably you can accompany them. Some people just need to know that someone is there with them. And as men, as good men, I think your role going forward could be, you know what, if you know someone, hey, listen, man, it doesn't have to be this way. I'm here for you. How can I help you? And I think doing it together, we will help lessen this abuse in our community as shortly. Our time is winding down. We can't believe we're down to 9 minutes left. And because of that, do we have any questions from the audience? Let me ask. Any questions, any comments from our audience?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Bartels. I'm a mediator. I mediate in a lot of family cases, cases that I receive from the prosecutor's office, and regular family cases. And first of all, I want to thank you for being here. And I really want to say that I honor you for the work that you do and for coming out today to speak about this topic. So I want to appreciate that our collective awareness is now to the point that we see that whatever we do in our adult lives, that they come from somewhere, and that we need to also resolve that in order to resolve any behavior that we have today. And what I see in my work is that everyone wants safety, everyone wants safe relationships, men and women. And I can say in all of the cases that I've worked with on St. Martin, I have not seen one person that enjoys, having unsafe relationship. Nobody wants that. And what I want to ask you really is also of a very practical nature, because I oftentimes see men that actually say this what is happening now in my life, this reminds me of something from the past, and I don't want this to happen anymore. And oftentimes what I can offer is limited time. I'm also a woman, which makes it, for sometimes a difficult dynamic, and they need like a safe space with another man or a group of men. So I want to ask you how men can find you, where they can find you, and what you can offer them.
I would like to interject that International Men's Day is in November. I believe it's the 19th of November. So, yeah, I would like just to plug that in shamelessly.
Yeah, it's a funny question. Not funny, but it's a question in that we're not particularly in any program for this, but I think we all, in whatever setting we are open to that. If there were programs, anytime I'm called for any type, I know these guys as well. If we're ever called towards any sort of program or longer activity, I'm sure we feel the need to be a part of it. Other than that, I know we're all very approachable people in society, and I don't. But we're also of an age, so I'm not sure if the younger crowd would just walk up to us anyway. I would say this: there are different social groups that can help men to be around men of different ages, and maybe can open more discussion, not just the sports teams, but there are also fraternities. There's also social service groups. There are a lot of NGOs. There are a lot of NGOs that could use more men. And that's a funny thing too. Most NGOs, like 95% women, are volunteers at NGOs. So things like that, I would encourage men to get themselves involved with, something outside of work and home, where you find other men.
Now, I was just saying that, as you rightly said, it's not necessarily that we are working with any particular program, but being approachable and accessible in our community, with the understanding of course, there's some limitations. Persons who genuinely are looking for help, if you're in a personal crisis and you need, even just for referral, or just need somebody to listen, to hear you out, I'm sure if you reach out to any one of us via social media, or if you encounter us in public, then we, among others, would be willing to offer support in form of advice, or, as I said, even just referral, maybe to point you in the right direction.
Okay, do we have another from the audience? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Elentia Baptiste Boseman, and I am from Women's Desk. And I must concur, I am very honored to sit in the presence of men and to hear the discourse. I am truly honored that you guys have taken the initiative to offer yourself, to share information with other men, because I think it's a rare something that we see on the island. So kudos to you guys. I really appreciate that. I have one small question, and my small question has to do with your perspective. You spoke about the machismo behavior within our Caribbean, and I would like to know, what is your perspective? Do you think that domestic violence includes not just the physical part, but do you think that extramarital relationships, which is such a grand thing and condoned something within our community, even though it might not necessarily be something that is addressed legally, except for a divorce situation. Do you see that as a form of domestic violence? Thank you.
To answer your question, yes, because, and I would say it more kind of leads, I think we talked about it already, a source. I think that can lead to domestic violence because of something that, again, it's a behavior that's been perpetuated over generations. So now when maybe being confronted by it, that man acts out in anger, or in this case, domestic violence. So I believe so, yes, to answer your question.
Thank you for that response, Jamal. We are down to the wire. And at this moment, I would like to call on our Honorable Minister of Justice, Ms. Anna Richardson, for her closing remarks.
Greetings to our panelists, the coordinators of this platform discussion, guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Though St. Martin recognizes domestic violence and gender-based violence in the month of November, in order to strengthen government's response in combating domestic violence, child abuse, and even gender-based violence, on June 30th, 2021, the Honorable Minister of ASR, Omar Utley, and my person, Minister of Justice, signed a domestic violence policy. Logically, we know that there is no one tool that can be used to effectively tackle this matter. However, every effort plays a significant role, and eventually we seek the community or a community-wide support against domestic violence and gender-based violence. What does that look like? It looks like unwavering efforts to report and address it so that we can help those who are in need. As Ms. Riley stated in her opening remarks, the goal is to have a domestic-free society. Though the word domestic is defined as relating to the running of a home or family relations, we universally recognize domestic violence as a term that speaks to the physical altercation between intimate partners. These horrific acts caused by both men and women are never okay and must stop. Platforms such as this panel discussion aids us in spreading awareness concerning this delicate issue. As such, it could not be a better time under the theme, Where Do You Stand?, to have this discussion. Since November 2020, in the capacity as Minister of Justice, I have championed for the awareness of domestic abuse and violence in order to eradicate this practice within our community. Being present in this moment, what I really appreciate about this platform is that it's an all-male platform. Ultimately translates into a very resounding message that domestic violence is not just a women's issue. As it is not, it is actually an issue that affects everyone. As such, I commend the panelists for giving their stance and standing together with women, men, and children in this fight. Continue to encourage adults and teens, both male and female, to report anyone who may be causing them harm. Perpetrators must realize that being abusive to others is against the law, and as such is punishable. Seek help and be positive contributors to society and in the lives of those that you love and who you may not know. On behalf of the Ministry of Justice, I take this moment to thank you, Ms. Riley, as well as the Domestic Violence and Mediation Platform, the project team of the Foundation of Judicial Institute St. Martin, SCIS, the Prosecutor's Office, the Department of Communications for their commitment towards this much-needed collaboration in our fight to eradicate violence against women, men, and children. In closing, I share the following remarks. So as I was going to say earlier, there was a lot of great ideas that were shared about how you can reach those who may most be vulnerable in our community, be it perpetrators or those who are in the receiving end. And I'm asking you as men, including you, Christian, because you were really, really great in the way that you communicated and you asked your questions. I'd like to see that you all not leave it to just a woman's platform to bring it forward, but from this moment forward, you make a commitment to do something on a continuous basis towards getting to our men in our community. Okay, we can get to the women because there are women who are perpetrators as well, but we're asking you to make a commitment towards getting to the men and the young men in our community. Can we have that? Thank you. So in closing, I'm gonna share this one quote, and it says, "Overcoming abuse doesn't happen. It takes positive steps every day. Let today be the day that you start to move forward." Asanta Harris. And that, lends right into my request to you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our Honorable Minister of Justice. Thank you, panelists. We are unfortunately out of time. I want to say thank you to our audience. Thank you to my co-moderator, Christian.
Thank you, Ramona.
And on that note, I want to leave you with this. To the extent that men stay silent in the face of other men's violence against women, they are not perpetrators, but perpetuators, allowing this violence to continue. Men, it's time to speak up and speak out. Thank you.